We are connected. All right. And we
All
already got a
right.
viewer. How about that? Lovely, lovely.
Nice.
Well, hello, everyone. Welcome. Go ahead and put something in the chat. Today, I have a special guest, John. I'm sorry, I'm blanking on your last name.
Paul Sisler.
John Paul Sisler. Yes.
No, 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 no John.
Oh,
No John. Just
Paul
Sisler.
Sisler, then I don't know what I'm talking about. And the reason I don't know what I'm talking about is because I just met this guy very recently on Twitter, and we happened to be in the same chat room, and he was telling me about something with a constitutional amendment and ending discrimination, and I was like, you know what? How about I just have you on my live stream and you tell us all about it? So I'm coming in blind. I don't know what's going on. I have you can't see it, but on the stream I have the cover image of your book, The Red Herring Effect, that people can see the whole time, which I know is
Okay.
available on Amazon. But tell me more. Who are you? What's the Red Herring Effect? What's going on? Tell me. Tell me.
Okay. Well, Paul James Sisler II, and I'm a semi-retired casino man. I was in the casino industry for 20 plus years and decided I needed a change in careers. So I decided to go back to school for law enforcement. During that time, I was also a bounty hunter. I had an accident, so it kind of disabled me. And basically, I was living off of income from that accident. And I saw Donald Trump on TV say that there were good people on both sides and decided to get into writing my book. So I wrote The Red Herring Effect, which is basically I go through the entirety of the Constitution, the articles of the Constitution, and I cover the primarily the First and Second Amendments. And I go through case law and describe how we can abolish systemic discrimination, how we can end poverty, and I wrote three constitutional amendments in this book to basically solidify and firewall that can guarantee a surviving wage to everyone. And I created a new tax system that would guarantee all of this.
Wow, that's super cool. So I guess I just love to hear tell me what these three constitutional amendments are.
Well, the first one is called the True Equal Rights Amendment. And let's see here. I can actually, I'll give our guests a little, I don't usually do this, but I will read off my section one of my True Equal Rights Amendment. Section one, the rights of citizens of the United States to be free of discrimination shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of race, sex, age, color, gender, sexual preference, orientation, religion or lack of religion, marital status, country of origin, height, weight, mental or physical state of being, or previous condition of servitude.
Okay. Yeah, it's active anti-discrimination and putting it
Correct.
directly into the Constitution, which of course makes it far more powerful, right? When it's a lot harder to deny that in like court cases and a variety of other
Correct.
things.
There's a large amount of Supreme Court cases, which again are in my book, that show how certain eras and certain times, the agenda of the country would dictate what those Supreme Court decisions would be, because basically, when you get to the Supreme Court, it's basically going to decide if what is presented is constitutional or not. Okay. There is nothing in the Constitution that protects everyone's equal rights as an equal. We have two amendments that are voting rights, which give minorities the right to vote and give women the right to vote. Well, because of those amendments, that's stating that the rest of the Constitution doesn't include them. Therefore, the Constitution only protects male and white. There's nothing else in the Constitution that gives anybody any equality in any way, shape, or form. So if you add this as a constitutional amendment, you now protect everybody.
I thought that Supreme Court interpretations of those amendments for minorities and women were the Supreme Court interpretations extended those to other parts of the Constitution. Is that incorrect?
No, you are correct.
Hmm.
The interpretations, which can be overturned.
That's a good point. Okay, yeah, that's fair.
Yep, it can be overturned. I mean, basically, look at the Civil Rights Act of 1964. If they wanted to, they could overturn that. That could be overturned because if you had, let's say you had 9 racist judges on the Supreme Court and they decided that, well, nothing in the Constitution gives everyone equal rights, we're just going to abolish the 1964 Civil Rights Act.
Hmm.
They could do it because there's nothing in the Constitution to protect that 1964 Civil Rights Act. Now, you add this as an amendment, now it's protected. Now they can't overturn it.
It's interesting. Yeah. I have a couple very technical questions about the specific language that you've chosen. So, one in there, did you include the word identity at any point?
I did not.
I'm wondering if saying, and this is just a question, I don't know the answer, but adding or any other identity or something along those lines might make sense. Just
That could
future-proof
be
it a little
added. That could be added. I mean, again, at the time that I wrote this, that was
bit.
my base for trying to cover everybody,
Yeah.
trying to give everybody equality.
Yeah, I think that could be kind of just a future-proofing measure that you could add in that might make sense.
Well,
Cool.
you get elected, that would be a further proofing measure for you to add in and present to Congress.
Yeah,
Okay?
yeah. I have. I want to
Get
get
on
through
a
yours
committee
first.
and present it.
Hmm?
I said, get on a committee and present it.
I
Propose this.
I might, yeah, and I want to keep hearing more. There is a very very simple and short constitutional amendment that I've thought of that I would love to add, but I want to come back to that after we've gotten through yours first. So, okay, so I love this, makes sense, this First Amendment. So this would be potentially the 28th Amendment or whatever order it comes in. Just about when it gets ratified, or is the number? Yeah, the number's not assigned till it's ratified. Okay.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, cool. So tell me about the second. I don't want to say the Second Amendment because that makes it sound like the Second
Well,
Amendment.
it's kind of funny because it covers the Second Amendment. Basically, the Second Amendment, it can be interpreted in 2 ways, as individual rights or collective rights. Okay. And there's going to be a lot of people saying, oh, no, it's individual rights. Well, no. If you go back to the District of Columbia v. Heller, it was a 5-4 decision, which means that was a very close decision. It could have gone the other way. And what it was a ban on handguns in the District of Columbia. All right. Now, it's not just the District of Columbia that you need to read. You need to read all of the case law that the justices utilized in supporting their either affirmation or dissent. And then as you start going back through those case laws, you can see how both sides of the coin can interpret this based on constitutionality on other decisions. Okay. And some of it even goes back to England on some of the laws that were written in England. Okay. Some of the court decisions in England. So if it's individual rights, then that means everybody in the United States has the right to own a firearm. If it's collective rights, then it means strictly militia. And since James Madison is not here alive today and present, we can't ask him what the intent was. So there's no sound argument to validate either side. So this could go back and forth forever. I wrote a constitutional amendment which there's a lot of sections to it, but basically it guarantees individual and collective rights. And I've got a lot of other things that go along with it for regulations and protections and gun control. So I think people will find it very, very interesting.
Yeah, let's talk about my stance on guns.
Okay.
Um, so I have a kind of a short term and a long term. So the short term is like quick, easy, simple things to reduce gun deaths right now, and then the long term is kind of the sustainable solution to help get to like actually deal with this problem more as a whole. So I'm going to skip the short stuff because that's things you've heard. That's universal background checks, universal waiting periods, that kind of stuff. So the long term solution that I have that I've built upon, others have come up with similar stuff, is the high level is to empower the gun community to regulate itself. And how we would do that is by empowering local militias, like maybe county level, tri-county level, maybe smaller in big cities, to write their own rules and regulations about gun ownership and use in their communities over those jurisdictions. And then we hold those militias accountable for gun deaths that happen in those communities, or as a result of people who obtain guns in those communities under those rules. And we can leverage the Department of Justice, which is obviously a federal administration that already exists and is currently very underpowered and needs to be beefed up, as well as whatever local measures the localities have. And there's a couple things here because guns are a community level issue, because you fire a gun in California, it doesn't kill somebody in New York, right? And so, and this also gives voice to gun owners who are advocating for safety. Your voice is just a lot stronger in your local community than it is at the federal level, right? Because right now we have the NRA lobbying Congress for these one-size-fits-all solutions for the entire country. So this is going to require a dialogue, between gun safety activists and gun owners to figure out, how much power the local militias should have, and then, of course, what the federal guidelines should be to cover the gaps, such as somebody moving between jurisdictions or whatever it is. So I'm interested just to hear your take on that concept. Especially because it seems like you've put a lot of thought into this, and you do care about both the collective and individual right to own a firearm.
Correct. I'm not going to dismiss any idea, because it's a conversation we all need to have. I come from a different perspective on it, which is more of a stronger federal establishment. Again, I wrote a constitutional amendment along with other things. I do believe the states should have some rights, and I believe that if you had communities come together and discuss these things, I think that would also be another strong avenue of approach. So, it's a very, very difficult issue to look at, because there's so many different views. You have people that don't think we should have any guns at all. Okay, well, I'm sorry that you can't put the genie back in the bottle here. Okay, the United States is one of the places that has more guns than any other country. The citizens. Okay, you can't take people's guns away. Go back. Let's go back to Prohibition. Okay, the 18th Amendment, where we took alcohol away from the people. Well, what happened? We had organized crime rise and bootlegging, the selling of alcohol. A lot of people died because alcohol was made illegal, okay, constitutionally. So then we have the 21st Amendment, which repeals the 18th Amendment, that now there's a constitutional amendment that protects alcohol for distribution, production, and sales. Well, you got to look at guns kind of in the same aspect. If you take guns away, the organized crime market is going to increase. So people are worried now about, AK-47s and AR-15s. Well, let organized crime become a major player versus the player that they are now, where people can still get these things. But now, if you make it illegal, everybody's going to want things. Just imagine what people will get. I do not want to see the United States in that situation. So we have to guarantee the individual rights. Now, there's a lot of arguments that there's way too many gun laws on the books. When you start looking at a lot of the gun laws, there's a lot of repetitiveness. There's a lot of nonsense. There's a lot of very good laws. Um, they need to be brought together and looked at and consolidated. It truly needs to be. It needs to be simplified. Is what we need. Um, I think individual states should have the right to decide if they have open carry or not. Um, I'm against open carry, but if a state wants open carry, I think they should be able to be allowed that. I think the qualifications to carry concealed need to be solidified federally. Um, then, as far as regulation, mental health testing, I think there needs to be a system in place to where if someone owns firearms and they've become extremely depressed, they're seeing a psychiatrist or they're seeing a doctor for it. I think there should be a way that we could peacefully hold their guns for them until they recover and become mentally healthy again to give the guns back. I think there's a lot of things that need to come into play, but we also have to do it tactfully and we have to do it with respect to the people.
This relies on the First Amendment that you wrote, because um, when you look at things like, okay, psychological exams or whatever, like there tends in these kind of like deciding who is and is not fit for anything. You absolutely run into problems with racism and other identity biases. So
Yes. Thus, you need my first constitutional amendment to be passed to make this one effective.
mhm. Yeah, and there's always things like you said. There are some gun laws that are bad. For example, one I learned about recently is if somebody breaks into your home to rob your place and you shoot them but they don't die, the robber can successfully sue you for damages, which is ridiculous. So it's
Yes.
incentivizing gun owners to kill rather than to doing the whole like a gun is a tool, not a weapon thing. Well, it's incentivizing the weapon side rather than the tool side. So putting the
Correct.
onus of safety on the owners is also a thing that we can do with the actual like legislation. Um,
I believe that's where also education comes into play. Just like driver's education, I think there should be high school classes teaching like the history of firearms. And not that any student should be firing a firearm in high school. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying there should be classes to educate people on firearms, the types of firearms, what they're used for, the history of them, what the laws are related to them, the state laws, constitutional laws, so on and so forth. And then if they pass this class, they can get a certificate, and then their gun training, their gun education continues afterwards if they decide to purchase a firearm. So, and I have that drawn out also, and it's very, very detailed because I truly believe that there's not enough education in relation to owning a firearm. And we have a lot of people out there that truly have no clue what they're doing. They don't know how to clean their firearm. They don't know how to care for their firearm. Um, I mean, a firearm that is continually used is going to get residue and buildup, and that can cause problems in an accident. Not that that's the biggest problem that we have with firearms out there, but it is an issue that needs to be looked at along with a multitude of others. So I believe that education is very, very important. I mean, just like driver's ed. I mean, you go through a driver's ed class because you're getting behind a 2,000-pound piece of machinery that, if not properly used, could kill lots of people. So you have to know how to operate that piece of machinery. I think it applies to firearms. You need to know how to operate that piece of machinery.
Yeah, I do like the argument of like it's too easy to get a driver license in this country. It's like it's reasonable that you should have to get that safety training should be required to obtain a firearm, and that would come in the form of a license. And I think registration also makes sense. And there are people who are going to be like, well, what about ghost guns? Like, honestly, anybody who's going to go out and buy who's going to put a ghost gun together, I'm actually probably not as concerned about them. They're probably pretty knowledgeable about guns and really care about guns in ways. It's not that there's like zero concern, but the prime when you look at the biggest sections of gun deaths, right? I mean, you're looking at like suicides. You're looking at
number one.
Yeah, that's number one. You're looking at you're looking at mass shootings that are typically by people who maybe bought the guns recently or were too young or obtained them in some weird way, like, but don't actually know much about guns. Like, when you look at the real killers, it's not coming from people who spend a lot of time around, who spend so much time learning and really getting, understanding guns and would put a ghost gun together. So I'm not actually super concerned about that, at least right now. But yeah, I believe that like licensing makes a lot of sense for a lot of things. I mean, you look at things like, you want to sell insurance, you gotta get a license to do that. You want to serve alcohol, you gotta get a license to do that. You want to serve food,
Yes.
you gotta get a license to do that.
Yes.
I think it's like, I think that concept is reasonable. I think that you should have to get a license to own a pet, but you wouldn't even be able to own any pets until you get a specific certification for that type of animal. So canines, felines, rodents, amphibians, reptiles, birds. Like, I think that would also help to educate and reduce the number of people who buy animals as pets who are just don't know what they're doing, or they'll abandon them, throw them away, whatever it is. And just for context, right before I started my campaign, I had a dog. She got a brain tumor. I had to put her down, but I had her for over 12 years. I got her when I was 12 years old. And, if we had to get that under the guise of my parents, and then when I turned 18, I had to go get a license and a certification, that would have been totally fine with me, because I was committed. That would have been nothing to me,
Yeah.
And so I do think that this concept of like, you need to know what this is a thing that can hurt people. You need to know what you're doing before you can start using it. I think that makes sense.
Well, I think mental health is the biggest issue, and here I have some statistics for you. Okay, from 2017, the CDC, 38,748 firearm deaths. Okay, this was 2017. 23,854 of them deaths from firearms were suicides. Okay, think about that. 38,000 total deaths, 23,000 were suicides. That leaves 17,000 that were either reported murders, non-negligent manslaughters. Okay, now you have approximately 5,000 of those deaths which are accidental deaths. In other words, a child gets a hold of a firearm, or somebody just didn't know the gun was loaded, or somebody was cleaning their gun and they killed themselves because they thought it was unloaded and it wasn't. Or they thought, well, I can clean it while it's loaded. It's not all right, So you have these different types of statistics. In relation to mass shootings and stuff like that, it's a small number of the total of deaths, okay? And our media portrays it as a really big thing and a really bad thing. Now, granted, one death is one death too many, okay? So if we do mental health, that's going to eliminate a majority of these problems. That's going to bring a lot of these statistics way down. Now, you got to realize too, motor vehicle total deaths was 40,000 in that year. Total suicides was 47,000. Total suicides, think about that, 47,000, and 23,000 of them were committed with firearms. Okay. Drug overdoses was 70,000 plus. Then, of course, we got heart disease and cancer, which are over 600,000 deaths a year for each one of them. Our media is not talking about that. But when there is a mass shooting, that is number one media, CNN, MSNBC, Fox News. They're covering it like it's the end of the world. Granted, it's not a pretty thing, but how come we're not out there on the highway showing every fatality with a car accident with the same, what are we going to do to reduce car fatalities? Okay. When these are the red herrings, people are making issues out of things. And then this comes back to political campaigning. So this pits the left against the right, and we got to do something about firearms. Well, our firearm things are okay. We need to get rid of the or handle the people that are causing these problems. Both are right on their issues, but they're making it a political stance and not addressing the issue. So that's where we all need to come together. We need to come up with a viable solution that works for everybody, that we can get something on the books to actually start reducing these firearm deaths. 38,000 deaths in a year due to firearms. That is a, high number. It's 100 and some deaths every day. We need to reduce that.
Yeah, and that's and like this is why I have this distinction between short term and long term, is like the quick, easy, simple things are not designed to get us to zero. They're designed to just save a couple lives, because death is a symptom we can't recover from. It's not meant to be the cure for the disease.
Right.
Like you said, you mentioned mental health. Like it's not something you can fix overnight with a piece of legislation.
Correct.
That takes a lot of time, and over the course of that time, you have people committing suicide with a firearm. But suicide with a gun is 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times as likely or more lethal than suicide with other methods. And when people survive a suicide attempt, over 90% of the time, they don't end up dying from suicide later on. Right? They go on to live longer, healthier lives. So it's like, if you can just remove guns from the suicide equation, you can just save a lot of lives. Again, this doesn't address the fundamental underlying problem, but it does save some lives.
Correct. Well, remember those statistics, though. 70,000 plus deaths were suicides. Only 23,000 were from firearms.
Yeah,
so there's actually more deaths from other means than firearms.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's because not everybody has access or is going to use a firearm for suicide.
Correct.
But it's about looking at what the lethality of different methods are. So it's like, you can save 10,000 lives with universal waiting periods. Come on, right? And again, cool. So I feel like we could talk about this forever. I want to move on to your next amendment.
Okay. It's called the Cost of Living Amendment. And basically, I establish with it what the cost of living is. I create a program that will determine on a semi-annual basis what the cost of living is. And our minimum wage would be based upon the cost of living. Where the statistics that I used at the time, the cost of living, I believe it was for 2018, would have come out to $16.50 an hour. That's the cost of living. So for someone to survive with the cost of living, they need to make $16.50 an hour. So basically, semi-annually, we would do testing to see what the cost of living is and adjust the minimum wage accordingly. So if the cost of living goes up, the minimum wage goes up. If the cost of living comes down, the minimum wage comes down. That basically firewalls your minimum wage. There's no needing congressional approval to try to get an increase while people in Congress are making $172,000 a year, and the minimum wage, which is $725, is barely $14,000 a year. Congress is taking care of themselves, but what about the people out there trying to survive? The cost of living, they're going to need $30,000+ a year. $14,000 doesn't make you survive. Guess what? You got to work 3 jobs to survive at $7.25. At $10 an hour, you can work 2 jobs and meet the cost of living.
So I want to hard disagree with you on this one. Half the country doesn't work for a wage, but damn near everybody works. We're talking about raising children, taking care of elderly or sick family members, volunteering, freelance work, artistry, whatever, you name it. In the 21st century, in the information age, we have this fundamental problem, which isn't supposed to be a problem, it's supposed to be prosperity, of automation, artificial intelligence, robots, right? Productivity is on an exponential rise. I want to move away from this concept of jobs are the solution to everything. Labor is for machines, life is for people. I want people to have, I want people to be able to decide what they want to do with their time and define for themselves what their work will be. And I see that the first step in that evolution is a universal basic income. One of the really important things here is that a minimum wage raise, as I said before, half the country doesn't work for a wage. A minimum wage raise is not going to help a lot of those people. And in fact, it could hurt some of them. Because even a marginal cost in the price of staple goods could be unaffordable for people who are scraping by on Social Security retirement benefits or disability that will not go up with a minimum wage raise. So I think that the concept of minimum wage to me is about raising the minimum wage is asking for nicer change instead of fighting for freedom. And I don't see it as a sustainable solution to this fundamental problem. And I don't want to get stuck in that. I'd almost rather have a constitutional amendment for a basic income. But even then, I would want to use language that makes it more flexible, because I see a basic income as a stepping stone to a future where we get off of fiat currency pretty much altogether and move toward an information-based economy where we are instead measuring the action of people in the world and how they're improving the world. So I don't think that minimum wage belongs in the Constitution anymore. I think if you had made that argument, 80 years ago, I would have been totally down with it. But I just don't think it makes sense today.
Well, yes and no. And I agree with you in one aspect, but I also disagree with you, okay? And let me point out the differences, all right? First of all, it would no longer be a minimum wage. It would be a cost of living wage. So those that are working and don't have the ability to do certain things are still going to be covered with a livable wage that they can survive on, to where they don't have to work 2 jobs. They can work 1 job. And I have some other ideas that go along with that. Now, in relation to UBI, I strongly support a UBI. I, in fact, create, and here's where you're going to really, when you read this and you read my cost of living wage, and then you see where I go with it and how I bring it together with a universal basic income, a universal a universal education and universal health care, along with a new taxation system. The sky's the limit. I'm telling you. You intertwine all of these together, and then retirement. When you look at Social Security the way it is now, yeah, it doesn't meet the cost of living. That's why I would instill a cost of living retirement, to where minimally people would get a cost of living wage at age 50, and the cost of living wage would be their retirement. So they would have the equivalency, whatever minimum wage, whatever the cost of living is, they would receive that as a retirement in their as a payment every month. If they wanted to still work, they could. They don't have to retire. They can keep working, and they're going to be making at least what they're getting in the UBI retirement. So basically, UBI is a very, very important part of our future, along with universal education. No one should have to pay for education. No one pays K through 12 now, though the funding sucks in a lot of places, and people have to help support that and contribute, which they never should have. Um, our undergraduate and graduate education should also be paid for by our taxes. And I have a whole breakdown under Article 1, Section 8. It's actually guaranteed to us education and health care. And people don't want to accept that. People in Congress try to change the terminology and say it means this or it means that. No, It's about health and education under Article 1, Section 8, general welfare and common defense. And again, you're going to have to get the book to learn more about that. But the bottom line is that I like your idea of universal income because we do need that. It is a necessity that we should have had decades ago. Now, when Andrew Yang first came out and talked about universal income, I was completely against it. Okay? Completely against it. I thought there would be just tons of people that would take advantage of it, and they would, decide not to work, not to, improve themselves and stuff like that. So I had to do some intense research, and I can go all the way back to the 1500s with Moore and Vives, who wanted a universal income back then before we ever even had a constitution. All right, and my whole perspective changed. In fact, my whole perspective changed so much, I even wrote a subchapter titled Andrew Yang in my book because of the difference that he made. And I had to edit a whole bunch of stuff in my book. I had to go back and make changes because he changed my perspective on quite a few things. And I had to re-educate myself on a lot of the technologies that we're coming into, cyber technologies, the next cyber industrial revolution that Andrew Yang was talking about. I had to adjust even my cost of living aspect that I had in mind with what Andrew Yang's talking about in relation to AI and things taking over what were once human jobs now becoming AI. So there's a lot of things that we need to look at and prepare for the future. So this is where I'm agreeing with you on your statement on what we need to do and how we need to change. But I also think that the cost of living, when you really look at what I've written here, you'll see that it applies to more than just a minimum wage.
Okay, so I guess if somebody is not working but is able to work, do they still receive this wage?
No, they would receive a UBI, and they would have the ability to go to school. And the UBI isn't going to be as much as what Andrew wants. It's going to be a lot lower. So the incentive is you can't survive on it completely, but you can do things, education, stuff like that. And there's also you're going to love what. Oh, I can't. I got to reveal in my book that basically allows every person when they turn 18 to get a fair and equal start. So I can't reveal it. You got to read my book on that because there's going to be things to where I eliminate poverty. Okay, this cost of living amendment in cohesion with other things eliminates poverty. I mean, if you want to be impoverished, which would be your choice, you could choose to be that. But if my ideas are instituted into government, poverty would come to an end. Nobody in this country would ever be impoverished again if they didn't want to be.
So yeah, I still want to get maybe change form my question a different way.
Okay.
So my concern is that if somebody loses their job,
Uh-huh.
are they not receiving any wage from the government at all?
Oh no, they would be receiving a wage from the government.
Okay, but so then when they get a job, do they then lose that wage that they were receiving, and
They
now
would
it's
lose.
replaced by the wage from the employer?
No, they would still receive a UBI that would be 25% of the cost of living. So if you're working, you're still getting a UBI.
So wait, so you're saying everybody gets 25% of the cost of living no matter what? That's a basic income. That's part of your amendment?
Yes, yes. Everybody, each and every single person from the day they're born until the day they die will receive at least a quarter of the cost of living as a UBI. Everybody.
Okay, and then you're saying on top of that you have this additional minimum wage that we think about in a classic way, that is the full cost of living. And so,
Correct.
okay, so people who have a job are now getting 125 minimum 125% the cost of living if they're working 40 hours a week. Is that what it's based on?
That's what it's based on, 40 hours a week. And I also have a suggestion of going down to 30 hours a week, which
Mm-hmm.
would then be 22.50 an hour as a cost of living wage, which I think is actually the route to go because it
Yeah.
opens up the job market to more jobs. If people are only working 30 hours a week instead of 40. Mental health wise, people would be healthier only working a 30-hour work week instead of a 40-hour work week. And they would also be getting a UBI, and it's not going to change the cost of living in doing this. It's just going to it's just going to change how people live, and people are going to live better. It's going to help stimulate the economy. People are going to have more time and more money to do things and enjoy life more.
Yeah, I mean it still feels like it's 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 very much built for where we're at right now and not for where we're going, which doesn't make it feel like a constitutional amendment to me. Like, right, so it's like if a piece of legislation came
Mm-hmm.
to the floor that was like everybody gets 25% the cost of living basic income period from the day they're born to the day they die, plus we're
Mm-hmm.
increasing the minimum wage on top of that.
Well, like I
um
said, though, there's a lot more to it, though. Like I said, I'm not revealing the whole thing to you. My
okay.
my my constitution or my cost of living amendment is a very long amendment.
Okay.
Okay, very long. There's a lot of information in there. I firewall a lot of things to protect the people, and I truly take into account the future of where we're headed with the cyber revolution. I truly take that into account. But again, I can't reveal. This
Okay.
is this is a very strong part of my book that I want people to buy the book.
Fair enough. No, I totally get it. I totally understand. Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Then we'll pause. We'll pause the conversation there and let people finish the conversation by reading your book. Um, so I want to address the elephant in the room here.
Okay.
There is no language in the Constitution that has been written in the last half century. How do we get any of these amendments actually ratified?
Oh, it takes people like you. It takes people like AOC. It takes people like Bernie Sanders. It takes progressive people. We have. It takes people like Andrew Yang. We need a progressive momentum forward that is really about the humanitarian aspects of our culture and looks at our future and wants to get things done for the people. It's going to take people like you to put it out there on what we need to do to move forward, to justify, to read what I have, and if you can improve on it, please improve upon it and make it even more solid to where people want this. Because when you talk to people on what they want on a day-to-day basis, okay, you take all the politics that's out there, Fox, CNN, all of that, you take that out of there. Most people want to be able to go to work, earn a decent wage, put food on their table, have a shelter over their head for their children, make sure their children get a good education and can do better than themselves. You know, people want this positiveness to move forward and want their children to do better. And people want to be successful, they want to feel successful. Well, if my ideas can surmount to that, then I think people will get on board and will want that instead of addressing all this other BS that's on the sidelines that's meant to distract everybody from basically the truth in living. You know, everybody wants a roof over their head. Everyone wants to be able to provide for a family. If they get sick, they want to be able to go to the doctor and not have to wait in line for 3 hours and with and feel like they're going to die while they're waiting there. They would much rather be able to go to the doctor, get what they need, and get back to doing what they're doing to keep their life happy.
Yeah. So first and foremost, I want to say I do not identify as a progressive. People are going to call me whatever they want to call me. But I've had people call me libertarian, Republican, Democrat, conservative, progressive, liberal, all of it. And part of that just comes down to that our terminology on these things has been really distorted and twisted by the media, and we don't have consistent definitions, so I don't use any of them personally.
Correct.
So that's a kind of a side note. I appreciate where you're coming from and your enthusiasm. It does feel a bit like passing the buck. It's very and advocacy is important. Obviously, Andrew Yang has shown us that advocacy is important.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
He didn't even get nominated. He only went through the first two, the caucus and the primary. And my goodness, look where we are now with UBI.
Yes.
But there's also this piece of like, okay, to make it happen though, we need something. Doing what we've been doing clearly isn't enough, and there needs to be something different, something new. Which is why, and I'm not going to rehash all of it right now because I've said it 1,000 times, and it's easy to find it on YouTube and stuff. But that's why some of the core pillars of my campaign are voting systems and government accountability, because this actually gets the people's voice back into the government, or into the government, to actually start to make these things happen in a much more real way. And so that's the stance that I'm coming from. That's like, this kind of stuff is fantastic, and I love these ideas and discussing them. But I always come back to my pillars, because I just feel that it's like, this stuff isn't going to happen until the people have a voice in the government, which they don't right now.
And I agree with you on that 100%. We were on Spaces last night, and you were talking about that. And I'm not a tech person, okay? When my publisher told me that I had to go on YouTube and Twitter and all of that, I was scared half to death, because these weren't my things, I mean, I had to research YouTube for 3 months before I even started my own YouTube channel. I mean, I was scared to death, okay? And then getting on Twitter, I was scared to talk, and communicate. And Spaces has opened up a whole new world for me. So, but hearing you, the few times I've heard you speak on different platforms on Spaces, and then last night, no, I completely agree with you. My book is just a stepping stone. I wouldn't call it passing the buck. I would call it more of a stepping stone.
Yeah,
but
you're right.
Your idea of accountability and transparency and the ideas you were presenting, now that is moving forward, okay? That is where giving the people the voice that you're talking about doing, I am so for that. It's unbelievable. I think if that was done, I think that could change factors throughout the United States tremendously.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, so yeah, I'm excited about this kind of stuff and bringing these things together. And of course, as you know, I met Chris last night. So, so spoiler alert, everybody, we might be starting on this government accountability project long before I'm actually in office, which is super cool.
Yes.
Um, but yeah, you know, this is uh, these are really great things to talk about, and I love your point that you were starting to get at this the idea of the title of your book about the red herrings, about how people are missing missing what's really happening. 600,000 deaths each to cancer and cardiovascular disease,
Yes.
and it's like
Yes.
that's environment, that's nutrition, that's education, right?
Yes.
It's right, suicide, 70,000 suicides. I mean, economic disparity is huge in that
Yes.
space, right? And so it's about finding these root problems and not ignoring what's really going on.
Exactly.
Again, addressing how cleanly defining what counts as press, so people are actually paying attention to what's happening instead of being distracted by all the political commentary.
Exactly. And that's
Yeah.
the problem. That's why the book's title is The Red Herring Effect. It's about all the red herrings that are out there that are propagated and how they affect how we all think. And if we can eliminate the red herrings, then people would be given, statistics and facts and truth and can make decisions based on that instead of getting all the propaganda coming out there to take you away from that.
Yeah, and people need the knowledge and education to be able to sort through that. That doesn't.
Exactly.
That's not the natural way that our brains work. We have to train ourselves to do that.
I know, and that's why I love your ideas and what you propose for the transparency and getting everything out there. And you were bringing up how do we, solidify the honesty and integrity of the press and journalism. Um, that's going to be a tough one to truly, make it to where there's accountability. And I think it comes through licensure. I think it comes through licensure and certification, kind of like lawyers are held to the bar. I think journalism needs the same kind of standards to where they're basically held to the journalistic bar, and it's crime and punishment if it's violated. There has to be consequences. Then you have secured journalism and the truth behind it versus the propagation that the spin and everything else. I mean, if you want to have those shows and spin it, great, but we need something to solidify the facts. And I agree with you. There needs to be a way to do that. I never thought about it and how to do that. I was just pointing out that they're the problem.
Yeah, well, hey, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm so glad I came across you over this last week on Twitter. I know you said you only have an hour, so we're coming up to that right now.
Yep. I have an appointment that I have to get to.
Yeah, this has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate it. This conversation is going to be permanently available on my YouTube channel. I'll send you a link to it. So if you ever want to access it or share it or review it or whatever.
Oh, I most definitely will.
But other than that, thank you so much. You enjoy the rest of your day, Paul.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes, I'm going to stop this stream. And,
okay.